Good morning, afternoon or evening to you all, and thank you for attending this Pragma webinar on how to grow non-aeronautical airport revenues. My name is Chris van Ryswyck, and I'll be one of your co-hosts for the next half hour. I've worked in the airport environment for almost 15 years now, the first 8 of which I spent as a commercial performance manager at Gatwick Airport. For the last 6 years, I've been expanding the breadth of my airport knowledge in Pragma, working on a number of airport diligence, strategy, and planning projects, from the Americas through to India and everywhere in between. I'm joined today by my colleague, Alex Avery.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you very much for joining. Just a bit of background to myself. I am the CEO of Pragma Consulting. I've been with the company for about 13 years, working across all the markets that we are involved in, both geographically and sector-wise, from shopping centres and mixed-use developments through to small airports under 1 million passengers up to the big global hubs, and as well as private equity and retail brands as well. We really look forward to taking you through the story and the narrative that we've prepared today.
So what we're going to go through is very briefly touch on who we are and what we do, for those of you who don't know us. We're then going to look at the market trends, including passengers, revenue, and demographics. We're going to look at how these demographics have then shaped the consumer themes. And finally, we're going to explore how retailers have adapted, how they can further adapt their strategy, and how airports can learn from this. We will be opening up the Q&A session, so please feel free to ask as many questions as you like as we go along. When we get to the end of the presentation, we will endeavour to answer as many of the questions as we possibly can.
Just to give you a bit of an overview to the Pragma proposition, we are one of the leading commercial advisors globally, working across 3 key pillars. Commercial strategy, which is all about improving day-to-day sales performance and customer experience. Commercial planning, which is relating to assisting on architectural build and design and refurbishment of commercial space. And investment advisory, which relates to supporting transactions on the buy side or sell side for infrastructure assets. And the range of environments that we work with cuts across high street shopping centres through to mixed-use developments, large global hub airports through to smaller regional ones, leisure developments, railway stations, city centres, and also retail and food and beverage brands themselves. In addition, it's worth noting that Pragma is part of Kin + Carter, which is a leading global digital transformation business. There are 3 key pillars within the group. Pragma sits within the strategy pillar, supported by other group companies that have a stronger digital focus as well as communication companies that deal with optimizing data and customer relationship management, and digital innovation, the likes of Solstice and Tab, who actually build digital products for the likes of Tesco, Marks and Spencer, and Unilever. So collectively, we provide a great mix across strategy, digital build, product, and communication.
So we're going to begin by looking at market trends, and where better to start than looking at the growth of passengers. Since 1970, worldwide passenger numbers have increased 13-fold, from just over 300 million to 4.2 billion in 2018. And last year, there were 2.5 times the number of passengers that we had at the turn of the century. However, that growth has not been evenly distributed, with North America and Europe's growth falling behind much of the rest of the world, particularly Asia and the Middle East. This has led to North America falling to 3rd in global passenger volumes, overtaken by both Europe and East Asia and Central Asia. This has resulted in 2 key impacts. The demographics have shifted significantly. In 1970s, North American and European passengers together accounted for over 70% of the global aviation market. Today, that figure is below 50%. And of course, this growth in passenger numbers has caused space to become more constrained. Although new airports have been built, and of course existing airports have been expanded, the rate of passenger growth has exceeded that of the growth in airports, leading to very constrained space overall. For example, at the turn of the century, there were around 15 airports worldwide, 15, that had passenger volumes of over 40 million passengers per annum. By 2017, that number had increased to 50 airports. So, what has the impact of this growth been on commercial revenues? Well, unfortunately, commercial revenues are a little bit more difficult to track back to 1970. But if we look at the recent information from ACI on European airports, we can see that total commercial revenue has been falling from 2012 through to 2016. And it's worth noting that this is in nominal. So in real price terms, that growth is even worse. And if we look at some of the European airports individually, we can see that most of them have been in decline. A few have grown marginally, but again, if we convert that to real terms, that growth is likely to be either flat or in decline. Some airports, notably those that have been able to capitalize on the growth of passengers from the Far East, have fared fairly well on reported non-aero revenues. What is it that is causing this decline in revenues? Well, the first is one that we've already spoken about, and that is that the space per passenger is decreasing. This makes the space far less attractive for browsing and shopping, particularly during the peak periods. The next item is with global brands becoming more prevalent, the offer in airports is becoming a lot more homogeneous. So the Johnny Walker bottles over here are one of the better examples of a product adapting its label for the different markets. However, even this leaves little distinction between the products themselves. We are also flying far more frequently than we used to. So although our net spend is increasing, we're spending less when we fly, if we spend at all. Of course, online shopping has had an impact on travel retail, just as it has on the high street and downtown, with many items not only cheaper, but more conveniently delivered to your front door, saving the hassle of airline restrictions on shopping, carrying heavy or bulky items, and so on. And finally, what we do with our time has changed. We now all carry entertainment and communication devices in our pocket, negating the need to browse the retail offer to alleviate our boredom. So what does this mean for the future? Well, if we look forward to 2040, passenger volumes are set to more than double, and it is estimated that 40% of that traffic will come from just 3 countries, China, the US, and India. But we're a long way away from 2040, and there are a number of changes that we've seen already. I'm sure you're all familiar with the generational monikers that are meant to so neatly frame the behaviors of each distinct group. There's been a lot in the news around baby boomers and millennials recently, but the demographics do not shape, the individual demographics of millennials, for example, do not shape the demands on consumers. There are several expectations that today's consumers seek, regardless of their demographic and age range. What are some of the key expectations that we're seeing in the market right now? Well, with people increasingly consuming time, there has been growth in the appetite for discovery and adventure. Social media and globalization have opened up other cultures, leaving consumers craving new experiences, which vary from fast, thrill-seeking adventures to the discovery of new places. Lifestyle is now increasingly important, and authenticity is hugely influential in how people choose to spend their valuable time and money. People want their lives to be meaningful and credible when shared online, so products and experiences must be genuine and, importantly, rooted and reflective of place. Many consumers increasingly desire unique products and experiences, as a way of defining their identities in a globalized world with more and more stuff. This has particular resonance in the premium and luxury segments, where uniqueness is now often seen as a more important than traditional brand status-focused indicators. And of course, digital innovation continues to drive the pace of change at a rapid rate. It impacts all aspects of the customer journey, from brand awareness through to product browsing, community engagement, purchasing, and fulfillment. It has dramatically changed the way in which people shop, and it has supercharged the expectations of convenience and immediacy, placing increasing power in the consumer's hands. And finally, ethical, environmental, and social considerations are increasingly important to consumer expectations and their demands. The role of a sustainable lifestyle is becoming more prominent, with local, regional, and global issues impacting upon choice drivers for products and experiences.
So what does this all mean in terms of the market dynamics? Well, in relation to the behavior and the structural changes, obviously one of the key shifts has been the growth in online and the percentage of retail sales that accounts for relative to bricks and mortar. This graph just shows that evolution and the growth from 2012, many of the markets around the world being in a similar state of maturity, with retail accounting for around 5%, online relative to bricks and mortar, but the growth rates have changed dramatically over that period, and also varying quite substantially across markets, with China being one of the most significant adopters of online, but also seeing quite a lot of difference within other global regions and even within European market itself. The UK, for instance, is one of the most mature at around 18% currently, but the likes of Italy are actually only around 6 to 8%. So it's very important to recognise that there is a difference in maturity and uptake across different regions. This next chart is an interesting one that shows how that's beginning to impact channel shift at a product category level. So this is the evolution of US cosmetic sales between 2006 to 2016 across different channels. Beauty is obviously a key channel within the travel retail market, and we can see here that from a macro perspective that department stores have been the key losers here, losing a lot of market share. E-commerce has been the undoubted winner, but also interestingly, beauty specialists have risen significantly. And this is the impact where brands now have the opportunity to go direct to market, which is great for the travel retail environment, because it means not only can we provide a great offer within the core duty-free store, but increasingly also standalone stores for new and interesting direct brands that want their own space. And to support that, this graph also shows the evolution of channel shift for global luxury personal goods, so sales by distribution channel and format from 2014 through to the forecast for 2025. Again, the key dimension we can see here is that department stores in the grey box have been one of the key losers here. That has been reflected by many of the troubles seen in mature and even emerging markets, with department stores being challenged and some of them closing their doors or at least rationalizing their estate. Online obviously being the key winner, increasing sales up to 25% of the luxury market. But the really interesting point to see at the top of the chart is the green box, which shows that airports are more than holding their own and in fact growing market share and forecast to account for 7% of luxury personal goods sales in 2025. And this really just goes to show that brands are seeking access to audience, and travel hubs continue to provide a great avenue to access the customer base. As a result, brands are investing more in their travel retail strategy, and that has also been supported by improved commercial space, better architecture and design, and better programming of the offer in order to create a good customer experience. So what does this all mean in terms of the right commercial strategy to address the challenges that we see, but also capitalize on the opportunity? Well, we'll introduce you to our purchase funnel, which is a framework that we use to help describe the purchase journey from point of initial awareness and brand consideration through to engagement, conversion, spend, satisfaction, advocacy, and loyalty, which, if you get all of these things right, ultimately lead to happy, high-spending customers who return into the hopper, but also help promote your product and your brand to other people as well. For us, it all begins with the brand. This is the key starting point in order to frame the context and the operations and the programming of your commercial asset. Now, we're going to talk through some various examples that we see on the high street and how that relates to airports. So the first one here that we have is Miami Design District. For those of you that aren't aware, this is a fairly recent development, which is an incredible mixed-use combination that fuses art, fashion, culture, entertainment, and food in a highly engaging environment with a very clear and distinct brand proposition. What this means is that everything down to the architecture and the design has been carefully thought through and reinforces that brand proposition through to highly engaging storefronts delivered by some of the best brands in the world that really create a point of difference and encourage people to interact with the offer. Secondly, it also translates into the way the brand is communicated through digital and online channels. This example of how the tenant mix is described, but also the fusion of art and events and programming to engage with the audience and continue to enhance the overall brand experience. And thirdly, it also stems down into the way the in-store environments are developed, highly Instagrammable spaces, really engaging design, use of colors, but also, again, the immediacy of online channels and social media to encourage people to visit and to engage dialogue with the customer base. Now, the great thing is that brands can be applied to any entity, in fact, and of course, with airports, that is absolutely the case as well, whether it is a small island airport or a big global hub. And the great transition that we've seen is how things have evolved from airports being considered a functional utility to a really engaging commercial entity. And that has been demonstrated incredibly well by the way that the Heathrow brand has transitioned and the impact that the advertising campaign has had. For those that don't know, it's the Christmas Bears, definitely worth Googling after this if you haven't seen it. It's a fantastic advert that really pulls at the emotional heartstrings, but communicates the importance of connecting people and how that relates to delivering an excellent customer experience as well as commercial programming. So the key points of getting the brand proposition right are that it helps to drive awareness of your airport and the commercial offer. It sets the basis for determining the point of difference. It also then provides a setting of expectations for the users, a framework for decision making that helps to align both your customers and the stakeholders, whether that is internal or external, and importantly drives an emotional connection which fosters loyalty, advocacy, and commercial engagement. Next up, it is about growing your digital reach. And again, we pull an example here from Bicester Village Outlet, which is one of the most successful designer outlets in the world. And through the combination of great physical programming with excellent brands at discounted prices, but also having a very strong online offer, they have managed to grow their customer base to the extent that around 25 to 30% of the footfall and sales are actually from Chinese markets. And a key avenue in which they've done this is using digital reach in order to expand the awareness of the proposition at source markets. They have transferred their websites into multi-language, so not only in English, but Arabic and Chinese. They also invest a lot in marketing at source, so have dedicated teams based in countries around the world, but particularly China, that help to develop relationships with brand partners, travel agencies and tour agencies, such that actually Bicester is rated one of the top 10 places to visit in the UK, alongside the Houses of Parliament and Buckingham Palace. The important thing is here that, again, this relates to airports of any size, and you don't necessarily have to have an expensive application to deliver this. There are many easy and relatively free channels such as Instagram and social media that can help to develop that line of communication with the customer. The benefit being that now really digital provides that opportunity to communicate off-site as well as on-site. Historically, it's only really been the departure lounge, which has been the core avenue for driving sales, conversion and spend. But that has now changed. Through digital, we can connect with the customer much earlier in the journey, at the point of booking the flight or pre-booking car parking, and then use that engagement to then entice them into the awareness of the products on offer, making sure that we then convert in the best way possible as they go through the airport, but also retaining that line of communication to engage with them prior, post-departure, as well as in the arrivals experience as well. The next key component is configure to captivate, and this is all about designing and planning your physical space to maximize the engagement of the consumer. There are 4 key dimensions that we see as fundamental to getting that right. Firstly, it all starts with flow, and ideally we want to get 100% of the passengers past 100% of the commercial frontage. Secondly, it is about driving footfall into the stores, crossing the threshold through having very engaging but also easily accessible, permeable spaces to encourage people to step into and experience the retail environment. Thirdly, it's very important to maximize dwell and have pause points throughout the customer journey, which slow people down in what is often a high-stressed and high-speed environment to actually pause, stop and engage and interact with the offer. And this can be done through innovative ways of using seating, landscaping, point of sale information or promotions to help people dwell and then engage with the commerce. And fourthly is about distraction, capturing people's attention, getting them to deviate off route and getting them to explore the environment. If we deliver on all these 4 components, then we will captivate to drive transactions. So a lot of what Pragma does relates to commercial space planning, working very closely with leading architects and retail designers around the world. And a key part of this process is exploring many different options of how best to configure the space. And Pragma's role is helping to determine what the appropriate allocation of space is across the overall quantums of core category, but also down to subcategory. And importantly, helping the team understand the different revenue potential across different options so that the design direction can be informed through the commercial potential. A great example that we've seen of configure to captivate is this development in Bangkok called the Commons, which is, if you like, a community mall, they almost call it. And through the combination of highly engaging architectural design, as well as great configuration in the product offer, they have really helped to captivate the consumer. Inside, they create a very human scale with interesting level changes, landscaping, places to hang out and where you want to spend time. And with that, they also have a very, very clear proposition around their story that is all about putting the people first, celebrating the product and the joys of food and beverage through to provenance, learning how to cook, as well as socializing and sustenance. This also translates not only from the physical design of the space, but also how it is communicated digitally as well. And this example here of what is a highly engaging take on a mall map. So rather than having just a functional plan, it changes it into different zones that relate to the different aspects of the tenant mix, but is also overlaid with an ongoing events and programming to help encourage different customer segments to visit at different times and generate that ongoing relationship. Fourth up, it is about engaging your audience. We did a really interesting product recently working for one of the leading malls globally in the Middle East on helping to reposition their asset for the new world. We spoke to a number of leading brands in a whole host of different sectors outside of shopping centres and of airports. And this is a fantastic quote from the director of Cirque du Soleil. "We want the audience to live the experience and be touched by the poetry. We want to generate emotions across all their senses. The more stimulated they are, the more they will feel the wow." The key point here is that it is all about driving engagement and capturing the attention. And even people such as Cirque du Soleil have to work hard to do that when people's attention spans are getting increasingly short. What we're showing here is an interesting table that demonstrates the top 15 retailers by growth in the UK across the past 3 years. Interestingly, it cuts across quite a few different categories, from fashion through to gaming, health and beauty, and furniture. But the one common denominator across all of them is that they have a very strong online proposition. But interestingly, increasingly, that is supported by a great physical real estate as well. At the top of the list is Farfetch, a highly innovative brand that have maximized the ability to create value out of customer data, but also combine this with a really impressive store environment that fuses that data capture and knowledge of the customer with in-store digital displays and interaction, but also a strong human touch through empowering their sales staff. Another brand on the list is the really successful JD Sports. So a very clear proposition. They also have a number of stores in airports as well. And they have delivered success through having a great product that has been reacting fast to evolving fashion trends, but also driving an excellent in-store experience supported by a strong digital proposition that allows them to communicate with their customer base and drive engagement, whether they're in-store or out of store or at home, through initiatives such as gaming and interaction, exclusivity and product launches, and links with key influencers and celebrities to help promote the product. And the other example we have here is Lush. This is one of the most successful cosmetics and beauty propositions in the UK. And again, why is this important? Because they are experts in delivering a highly sensory experience. Firstly, it even starts with smell. So typically before you even get to the store, you can smell the aromas wafting down the high street. Then it moves on to sight in terms of having highly engaging window displays and merchandising in store. After that, it moves into touch. So encouraging people to test the product, to interact with it, to wash their hands, to be engaged by different employees, making it a really fun environment. And they also combine that with sound as well, and music, and even listening stations. And they're almost adding in taste as well, just in the basis that they make the products look so tasty you want to eat them, but I definitely wouldn't recommend that, given that it is all essentially soap. The point being that whatever the retailer, whatever the experience, the important thing now is that the physical environment has to deliver a sensory experience, and the opportunity is to mix that across each dimension of the human senses in order to create a memorable experience. Fifth, it's about categories to catch the customer. So a lot of the work that Pragma does is looking in detail at product performance and sales by category at the individual unit level, looking at the relationship between retail and food and beverage. And the key point here is that every airport or asset will have hero products. And the key thing is then to identify what those products are, to maximize the opportunity, both in terms of space and configuration and tenant mix, and ensure that you're getting the right balance across different categories that complement the overall experience. Some examples from airports we work with around the world. Brussels have done an incredible job at really promoting the fantastic offer of Belgian chocolates. So a great mix across different price points, different types of brand, and really celebrating a hero product here to drive a lot of engagement and sales with their customer base. Another example is the Harry Potter store at Heathrow. Interestingly, this actually started as a pop-up unit, but it was so successful, it then moved to a full-time line store in one of the premium spots, and again is taking a product that has high global awareness but very strong local distinction, and maximizing the opportunity to create a point of difference and get customers to engage. Further afield, over in Jamaica, we have an example of, again, a great heritage and cultural product, championing an icon of the island and translating that into a great retail experience that has a democratic mix of products to different price points, but great souvenirs related to the experience of visiting the island. The next point is empower your employees. And this one is that we think is really important, particularly in the digital age. We feel that often people rush to digital first and increasingly forgetting the very important role that staff and employees and partners play in interacting with consumers. Again, we were doing some really interesting search with a number of the top luxury brands around the world to understand what is it that really drives the best customer experience. And this is a great quote from a luxury resort operator we were working with. So regardless of the physical components, the best memories always come back to the human factor. Guests will always remember what people have done for them. So even in the context of paying $20,000 a night for an incredible Maldivian luxury resort, actually what people remember most is the quality of the human interaction, and that really should not be underestimated, and equally applies to the airport environment, whether it's frontline staff or those in the shop floor. Again, some of the analysis that Pragma has done in this area, not only do we look at category sales across annually and seasonally, monthly, but also at day part. And what we were investigating here was how sales varies at different times of day in relation to the flow patterns and volumes of customers coming through the airport. A key dimension that we noticed was that actually the sales per passenger was decreasing just at the point when the traffic and the volumes coming through the airport were at their highest. On further investigation, this led us to realize that actually the staff store rota for the duty-free operator that we were working for was not really optimized to match the profile of the traffic coming through the airport. And in fact, many staff were finishing what was quite a long and early start shift just at the point where passenger volumes were highest. As a result, there were long queues and also tired and disengaged staff. So by addressing that, identifying where the opportunity was and changing the shift pattern to be more closely aligned to the hours of the airport, they managed to achieve improved sales. And this is just an example from one of our partner businesses in Kinnan Carter, the app business, who do a lot of work in creating digital products that help employee customers and staff, working with the Kingfisher Group in DIY, helping to create technology-based initiatives that have really helped empower the workforce, help them be more educated about the product so that they can help upsell to customers and help the customers source and find what they want. And again, so this is where there's that opportunity to combine the physical interaction with the employees with the technology to help make a better experience and ultimately serve the customer better. And finally, it is all about accelerating your advocacy. Well, what do we mean by that? You might wonder why Doha International Airport decided to put a giant teddy bear in the prime spot of a multi-billion-dollar new terminal building. And actually it comes down to building advocacy. And you could argue that this is probably the most photographed teddy bear anywhere in the world. And anyone that has been through there will just see the people lining up, whether it's businessmen, locals, families, capturing selfies and communicating what is a really distinct and different aspect of the experience. And the point being here that this can be translated across any market, any product at any scale, and is really about developing that dialogue and relationship with the asset. And we see here another example of the Indian elephant outside Bangalore Airport, or celebrating hero products in Brussels with the Belgian Friet. So in summary, we've talked you through a number of the key ways to address the challenges, and just to recap on those tactical initiatives. In the context of having space constraints, it's all about using your space more efficiently. In the context of homogeneous product, it's about celebrating your point of difference. To address the increased flying frequency, we must ensure varied and dynamic programming. And to address online price pressures, it's all about maximizing the value of the experience, not necessarily just chasing the lowest price. And then in terms of competing for people's time, it is all about capturing the attention. And from a strategic perspective, if we optimize each stage of the purchase funnel, we will drive better spend and commercial experience. So it begins with the brand. It is then about growing your digital reach. It's configuring the space to captivate. It's then engaging your audience, providing categories which catch the customer, empowering your employees, and accelerating your advocacy. So in summary, we hope you find that an interesting session. These are the ways in which we can help clients around the world. Through commercial strategy, it is how do we improve today's performance? And examples we work with the likes of Heathrow on category space improvement, Brussels Airport on digital loyalty programs. In commercial space planning, it is all about how we plan for future space. And examples we work with the new Terminal 2 over at Mumbai, or Guadalajara in Mexico on terminal refurbishment. And then investment advisory, which is all about understanding the revenue potential of the asset through projects we've done on commercial due diligence for the Brazilian regional airports or train stations as well.
Well, thank you everyone for your time today. This concludes the presentation. We're now going to go off script and try and answer as many of the questions that have been asked. So Alex, what have we got coming through?
So one of the questions, Chris, is how best should strategies be adapted to different markets?
Well, I think the important thing to note is that although passengers are flying all around the world to different markets, that the nature of airports is that they're all different. And indeed, even within a single airport with multiple terminals, each terminal can be different. So you have to start, I think, with the passengers, understanding who they are, who's utilizing that, why are they using that particular airport or terminal, where are they flying to, and then from that, understanding what their needs and desires may be from the airport, and then doing everything to make sure that you maximize those desires, getting the flow right, as you discussed earlier, all the way through to getting the right product in front of them to help maximize those revenues.
Some more questions here. So how do you maximize commercial space to accommodate the growth of low-cost airline passengers?
So low cost is one of the topics that has been around now for a very long time. And certainly when low-cost passengers first started flying, there was a distinction that low-cost passengers were different in terms of their outlook and their spend potential compared to scheduled and charter passengers. However, we don't believe that that distinction is that clear-cut any longer. But passengers will fly in terms of what's convenient for them, and certainly the likes of EasyJet, who are promoting business travel on their flights, means that you aren't just getting people without money on low-cost carriers. Everyone will travel low-cost nowadays. It's again important to understand what is it that those low-cost passengers want. We typically see that low-cost passengers will have a greater demand for grab and go in F&B. They also have a little bit less dwell time in the airports normally. And so it's important to be able to maximize products and services that are quick and efficient in order to meet their needs, but also taking note of the fact that low-cost passengers are more likely to be frequent flyers. and therefore we need to put in an offer that adapts and changes based on that flying frequency.
Another question here is, what is your view on future space demand, taking into account the shift to new retail and F&B concepts, and will this result in increased space demand compared to today's standards? I think on that point, there's two dimensions, and firstly, in terms of the shift towards F&B as a growth category, it undoubtedly is very important, but there also becomes a finite limit to the extent to which F&B can provide higher productivity and sales relative to retail. So undoubtedly it is about optimizing the spend potential from F&B, but also recognizing that there will always need to be a balance across the retail categories too, and actually using food and beverage to encourage dwell in the right areas adjacent to and around the retail, and also using it to anchor and segment different zones of the airport, such that a great luxury F&B offer can be placed around a similar retail offer, or a kind of faster, dynamic, younger positioned value food offer can be supported by suitable adjacent retail. We are also seeing a drive towards the kind of hybrid combined concepts that have retail and F&B within the same unit. There's the kind of varying degrees of success of that as well. Obviously, we see that quite often in department stores now. If you wander around somewhere like Selfridges, they've been putting in more F&B to encourage people to dwell and creating different offers in different zones of the department store. But you also see that hybrid mix of retailers having a combination of food and retail. Rafa, which is a great innovative cycling brand that are very strong on community, have created the kind of Rafa Cycle Club, which combine both retail sales as well as a coffee shop offer, and that drives a lot of audience engagement and ongoing reason for visit. One of the key things is just to ensure that the proposition is optimized. Sometimes retailers aren't great F&B operators, and sometimes F&B operators aren't great retailers. So it is important that the combined proposition actually delivers a good experience across both of those different categories.
I think another question here is Instagrammable going to become less important? And if so, what will replace it? I think it's a brave person who's going to bet against technology and certainly Facebook, who owns Instagram, going forward. We've seen certainly a lot of competitors come and go and not really make a dent in Facebook. I think the Instagrammable part of it, if we turn this into a verb, is the ability really around sharing images, and we don't see that is becoming less important. I mean, one of the reasons why we are starting to see the rise of more exotic and far-flung destinations as appealing to passengers is all about going to off the beaten path, going to destinations and trying things that haven't been Instagrammed, or at least widely Instagrammed before, or if at all within your group of friends. So we certainly see that Instagram is going to continue to play its part. However, that shouldn't be the overriding principle when we look at design. So when we look at any layout and any elements that we incorporate within an airport, it's more around meeting the demands for that passenger, making them feel relaxed, making them feel welcomed, making it nice and light and inviting. If you can do all of that and have something that everyone wants to take a picture of and fly through and experience, then all the better.
And I think just to add to that, obviously, Instagram, okay, take video aside, but essentially is a kind of two-dimensional picture on that basis. And the point around, yes, people's visual literacy is definitely increasing. And as a result, people are judging quality of offer through the way in which it's presented is becoming more and more important. But to build on that, the aspects we talked about, experience across all the senses, where, if you like, digital has helped to revolutionize the role of the store. And it isn't just what the eyes can see, it is what you can potentially taste, it is what you can touch. and that human interaction as well that we talked about as being really, really important to driving good experience. And yes, there are fads and trends that will come and go, but the actual 360-degree kind of environment and sensory experience and the human element will always be an important part of driving a great customer experience.
Another question is whether airports are better to introduce multiple outlets of the same brand, which provide higher margins, or to work with various brands with lower margins. I suppose the first thing would be it depends. It would depend on the margins differential between the brands and the potential sales of those. And I would certainly say to whoever asked that question, if you want to get in touch with me directly after this, I'm sure I'll be able to explain in more detail how we may be able to help. However, having said that, one of the things that we would need to assess is if we're looking at multiple brands, that would increase the width of the offer. If you put in the same brands, particularly in specialty retail, if I'm a person who likes to shop at H&M, but you only provide a Zara, then you aren't going to appeal to me. You're only going to appeal to the Zara offer shoppers. If, however, you can put in both an H&M and a Zara, you will manage to appeal to me as an H&M shopper, as well as the existing shoppers who shop in Zara. So the question comes to how do we see the penetration changing across the different offers, and whether that margin differential between the two would result in a higher return. The other aspect is around the location of the units. It's absolutely fine to have multiple offers of the same brand as long as passengers are not passing the same offer 4 times on their journey to gate, in which case they are soon going to switch off from the offer entirely, not just the same brand, but the risk of getting them bored with the entire commercial offer and diminishing their penetration.
And I think just to add to that, obviously one of the benefits for multiple brands is that it allows you the ability to flex and change the offer in a fast changing fashion-based environment, whereas standalone often then has higher impact and a stronger proposition. So it will come down to variances in passenger volumes and the strengths of the tenant that's being considered. Some interesting examples we've seen in airports is where actually to get the kind of best of both worlds, there's concepts where it is dual fascia but one operator. So the benefit of having a news and media offer on one side of the unit, and then that is presented with that brand frontage. On the other side, it has a strong gifting proposition, but actually in store it's operated by 1 or 2 employees and the operational cost is shared. So there are more innovative ways to make it work in, say, smaller scale environments, or get the balance between choice and clarity of offer, but maintaining operating cost at a lower level as well.
Well, unfortunately, that's all we have time for at the moment. There are a few unanswered questions, and what we are going to do is we are going to answer those questions within our presentation deck. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. If you'd like a copy of the deck, complete with the Q&A section appended to it, please do contact either me or Alex. Also, if you'd like to know more about the type of work and how we may be able to help you in the future, please don't hesitate to get in touch.
The other component, we'd be very happy to replay this presentation, either if it's directly with your airport teams in person, depending on the geography, or another WebEx. So if there are aspects you'd like to discuss in more detail, we would also be very happy to replay that back at another time. So thank you everyone for joining, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you, and have a good week.